Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Back in the studio today. Last week got pretty crazy with that tropical storm / hurricane. I don't even know what they were classifying it as, but down here at my house, it has rained so much that my yard has been permanently soggy. Like, anytime it's been raining almost every day, as soon as the rain hits, it gets into this weird runoff state where it looks like my yard is going to flood. And it's never been like that. I've been in this house for a couple years now. So whatever has been going on is crazy, at least in terms of the water. They took my garbage, and the truck, whenever it put it down, like the lid got messed up, so it was hanging open. It collected about a foot of water in a half an hour. Like, I went out, and I'm talking about like one of the big garbage cans that they put on the truck and dump. So it's been crazy. Last week, I didn't actually get to go live. I couldn't get Matt on the phone. I had barely had any internet. I tried to use like my wireless, but the storm knocked everything out. So it took me about an entire day to get that episode to upload. So I apologize for that. Nothing really else I could do. Just didn't have the connection or anything. So we're back at it this week. And of course we get even more horrible news, because college football right now is looking like it is going to be canceled. I think it started last week. When did the MAC cancel? So the MAC canceled, UConn canceled. I can't remember if we talked about if I talked about it on the show last week or not, because I can't remember the exact timeline with how crazy everything's been. And then UMass canceled. The Big Ten, they took like a vote that didn't really count, like an off-the-record vote. That got leaked yesterday. Everyone kept saying that it wasn't going to happen, that there might be a chance. But then today, they announced that they're postponing. And I think that they worded it that way because if things change, then they're going to play football. And so I think that's a key term. Now, as of right now, I think they said they were waiting until the spring. So the Big Ten, they announced earlier today that they're postponing fall sports. And to be honest, I really don't think that they care about the other fall sports. They're looking mainly at football. And I'm wondering if they were getting reports of the vaccination tests that have been going on and how everyone's saying that the vaccine is on track for November. Like, I wonder if this decision is purely money motivated, where they think that they're going to be able to get people in the stands. And so you bring that in. I don't know if they're even going to be able to get that. It's a crazy gamble that they're putting it on, that they made this call, but that's the only reason I think they make it this early, is that they have teams in the conference and television deals where they think, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and be able to get fans in the stands, and then we'll be pretty much the only game in town. Because later today, the Pac-12, they announced that they're canceling or postponing the same thing, all sports until January 1st. So there's a difference between what the Big Ten did and what the Pac-12 did. Because the Pac-12, their cancel or postponement, whatever their word they're using, it includes basketball. So they're saying that none of their November camp stuff, like, that's not going to happen at all. Their timeline, the way they made it sound, is that they're not even going to start practice until January. The Big Ten left it kind of open-ended where they said, oh, no fall sports, but we might be able to get back in and have teams working out or whatever, and then start in late December, early January. Like, I don't even know what the timeline is, but those two big conferences making the call definitely puts pressure on the other ones. I don't see how. I think was the Mountain West, they also canceled. I think I might have missed them earlier, but I don't see conferences that are a step down. I don't see how they're able to stay open. The only one possibly that I could think of off the top of my head would be the Sun Belt, just because of where they're located and some of the stuff that's going into that. But I want to get your thoughts on it, Matt, before I get into some more details and stuff.
Well, just based off of what you were saying, it feels like there's not a lot of data that's being used in the decision-making process. And I think there are so many unknown variables that we're just rushing to make choices because we're so worried about the legal aspects of somebody getting really sick. And I've learned over the last 2 weeks probably more about the legal end of families contracting the virus and then turning around and suing, every person under the sun. And I'll use, for example, it was I was talking with someone who has a really good understanding of this process and said, well, for example, if I were to take my own kids, and even though I'm willing to sign waivers to say I want them to participate in sports, if they're a high school athlete and they go to another school for a game, contract the virus there, and then end up sick and passing, then the school that they played at can get sued. The athletic association can be sued. The state can be sued. There's all these different people up and down the chain that can then find themselves in legal trouble, which is where I think a lot of these programs are just shutting the door to it. And I think it's really handcuffing a lot of people, because when you look at the opportunities that playing is giving, and I'll take it a step further with my own team. We've had 7-on-7s. We've had outside practices. I've had no issues. I've had no players reporting any symptoms, and we've been following the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the CDC guidelines for returning to practice. And we've been doing outdoor practices and trainings and stuff. We haven't had any player have any symptoms, and we do the we do the temperature checks, and we go down through the questionnaires and everything else. I hate to say it, but there's some of it that it seems like it's politically motivated, that we're making changes without having a lot of data backing up. The one of the bigger points that they use is the camp in Georgia, where there was a really high rate of people infected. But when you look at actually what was going on there, they weren't following any of the guidelines. There was no temperature checks. They were like all singing and chanting and like yelling. That they say, if you're doing that stuff without a mask, you're putting more stuff in the air. You're spitting more and doing stuff that can be easily transmittable to other people. They were in tight. They were in closed air spaces. They weren't outside. It was like, when you look at literally everything that you could possibly do to try to transmit and spread it, they were doing it. And there's a lot of places where they're taking the precautions, and you're seeing fewer cases and instances of the virus spreading.
And see, that's where it's going to be open to sort of interpretation of what teams are going to be allowed to do what. And I think the big key here is that these conferences, they span multiple states. And I know we're going to dig into the high school stuff in Pennsylvania here in a little bit. But whenever you're dealing with a lot of the states that have strict guidelines, I know you said it seems political, but a lot of that stuff is political. They're only going to be able to do what the governors are allowing. And I had someone tell me that they've been waiting, their college team has been waiting for the go-ahead from their governor to like open up like full practices, and it hasn't come. And it's almost like they're waiting just to be canceled at this point. And so that's where you've seen one of the dominoes fall. It's only going to happen if you're not allowed to do certain things. I think Governor Wolf, when they talked about like the per person limit on like indoor venues and things like that, it's almost impossible for Penn State to make locker rooms and things like that work. Because I think his latest press conference, it was like 25 people. It's almost impossible. So if Penn State's not going to be able to get that to work within the state guidelines, there's probably a 0% chance of Pitt making it work. Like, Pitt's not going to play and have Penn State sit it out. That would be the most lopsided. I mean, that would have to hurt on the recruiting trail. Like, if I was Narduzzi right now, I'd be calling up recruits and saying, like, hey, we're still playing right now. But then, on the other hand, James Franklin could be calling and saying, look, we're number one for player safety. So it's like a flip-flop either way, and that's where I think it's just it might be a long, drawn-out, month-long thing. And I feel bad for the kids that are on campus. Some of the colleges across the country have opened up. I think Notre Dame has opened up. Some of the other ones in the ACC that are starting to go early. Like, it's full on right now. So how many of those guys are going to come back from going to class and potentially spread it to their team? And I think that's what's going to be the initial shutdown measure. I mean, the other big thing is you have schools like Nebraska and I think Iowa. They said that they wanted to play. Iowa even talked about they were going to have fans in the stands up to 100% capacity, and I think Nebraska said the same thing. So I think a couple extreme comments like that really forced the conference's hand. Because like you were saying, you can't say, okay, we're going to bring in Penn State into Nebraska, where you're coming from a state where you can't really do anything. Like 100-something person limit on outdoor contests, so they have 0 fans, and you're going to go into Nebraska with 100% capacity?
But here's the other part to this, is that you're looking at how do you justify a lot of these Power 5 conferences originally said our plan is to host conference-only games. So then the logic just immediately goes up, because they were saying, well, you're gonna contain a lot of the spread of the virus and a lot of the cross whatever from the out of game schedules and different stuff by keeping it within the conference, that it can be easily traceable and not really have as many concerns as far as like how far it spreads throughout the country if you end up getting one of those teams that goes to a hot spot. To me, when you look at what is going to be more at risk, it's not having the players available for testing daily. It's not having them in the facilities where they have a lot more structure in place, and by having the players out, I think they're at more of a risk of contracting the virus or spreading the virus.
Yeah, and it's going to be something that it's going to be very hard for them to track, because you're taking them out of state, you're bringing them back, then you're sending them to class. I know a lot of schools are doing like the virtual only class, and I understand where a lot of coaches are coming from, where they say like, you're going to be safer on campus with our doctors, because you send a couple of kids home. Some of them, if they're in a rural community, they're not going to have the same type of medical care that they're going to have on campus. So it's almost like an opt-in kind of like, let's keep doing the voluntary workouts, make sure our guys are safe. Because I would assume that's what the Big Ten is going to keep doing. Like, they're still going to do some type of workouts or whatever. They just canceled the, hey, we're leaving campus type part of it. Because it's almost like when you have too many moving parts, it's going to be tough. And that's why I'm hearing that, like, even in the ACC, because it's so spread up and down the coast, you might see certain teams opt out while others try to play. And I think that's where the SEC rumor that came out is coming from, where if you're hearing from certain teams, hey, we might not be able to make this work, and you're only going to have half the conference play, the SEC is looking for schools that are trying to play, and they might just do a 32-team season, or like I don't even, maybe it's not an even number. Like, let's say, because like they pull in the Nebraska and Iowa, and they just say like, this is going to be it. You're going to play like a regional pod. And I mean, my key thing, Matt, that I talked about last week was I don't understand where these conferences have it in their mind that they're going to play 10 games. Like, why are you trying to force that? I think the Big Ten, what they should have looked at instead was more of a regional, only play your division. You play 6 games, it's a round robin because they have 14 teams. You can put a mandatory 2-week quarantine built into your schedule. Like, they could have taken advantage of the NCAA moving it up, played the first game like August 31st, and then you have a week off, then you play the next game, and then you just play through. So then there's no worry about, like, with Major League Baseball right now, they're canceling games. Would the Cardinals only play like 5 or 6 games?
And they're still ahead of the Pirates.
Yeah, and they're talking about trying to move Major League Baseball into a bubble now. Like, a little late, guys. What are you going to do? At this point, they're like, yeah, we're going to try to move it into a bubble just so we can get the playoffs going. But it's like, how? Why? Are you going to go by winning percentage? Because if a team ends up only playing 20 games and everyone else plays 60, how is that going to be fair? Do you just cut them out and say, like, better luck next time? Is there a certain game limit that you have to have? Maybe you go strictly by wins, which, again, wouldn't be fair. I don't even know where they're going to go with it. And that's what scares me going for college and into, like, a sport like the NFL. Because, like, even keeping the Major League Baseball thing, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Toronto Blue Jays wanting to play in Pittsburgh. The state shut that down. They said no. So you're going to tell me that they won't let the Blue Jays play there, but you're going to be bringing 100 kids from, like, Florida State up to play a football game at Pitt? The state's going to say no to that. I mean, that's basically what it is. I would be shocked, like I said, if Pitt ends up playing and Penn State doesn't. And I think it comes down to the state ruling, whatever that state is, and I know that there's whatever coming into it. They already have a mandatory quarantine in Pennsylvania, or voluntary, whatever they're calling it now, for 14 days if you travel from half the states in the ACC. So they're just going to ignore that so Pitt can play some football? You're shaking your head no.
Because they're going to be able to test the players. When they get back onto campus, if they test you and then you don't have the virus, then you're okay. You know, I think that's part of it, is that there's going to be test protocols, and they're not saying that it's mandatory because he doesn't have the power to do that. He can make his recommendations, and basically it provides the framework for people to base their decisions. Now, you can, off of those recommendations, you can choose to go against it, but then if you end up having someone contract coronavirus and getting really sick, then a lot of that pressure's off him, because he can have the deniability of saying, we put the guidelines out to not be participating, but they chose to follow their own lead anyhow. And it kind of gives him an escape.
And that's why I wonder if, because of some states not even doing any of that, if you're going to get like a really regional football schedule where you only play like 5 games. And like North Carolina could pull it off if they just played like a round robin with Wake, UNC, Duke, NC State, and like ECU, maybe App State. And like that would just be their season. And if there's bowl games, there's bowl games. I think the Alamo Bowl, they already invited Texas. So Texas is your first bowl eligible team. They said even if you don't play any games, you can come play in the Alamo Bowl as like an exhibition or whatever they're going to do in like December, because that game's usually like the 31st or 30th maybe. I don't even know what the exact date. It's earlier. But you're going to be looking at things like that, and like Texas would be another state where if they really wanted to, they could pull it off. Florida, if you have enough teams within that, I think that's where it's going to start to fall apart. And maybe you let some teams in. I just don't know. But I think, like everyone has been talking about, most of the major media, they think that the other conferences are going to follow. Like if the Big 12 cancels tomorrow, or by the time this is out, then you're really looking at 2 other conferences. It's just going to be the first domino. And if Major League Baseball stops play and tries to go to a bubble, I hate to be negative, but I think you're just looking at an entire thing bringing down the NFL next. They already pushed back the preseason games, and just looking at some of the other things, like I said, the big key is going to be like the cross-state travel. You can try to hit in and out. Like you said, yeah, you're going to be able to test certain things like that. But if one team travels through like whatever state, and I know they have the private jets, but look how Major League Baseball started. You had the Marlins get it, then they went to Philly, And then it just like ballooned from there. Teams missing games. And with football, if you're trying to force in this whatever 17-game season, I think that's where they're stuck. Because for whatever reason, they're stuck on playing their normal schedule. Maybe it's for salary reasons. In college, there's zero reason to do that. Like I said, you could just play your division and then pick a champion like you used to do back in the old days. And then that's it. And you could have the built-in quarantine. You could play your season if you really wanted to. I think there was a doctor at Duke that came out with the ACC today saying that they could play it safe. And I believe, like I said, I believe Duke could with UNC and NC State. It's just whenever you get to such a large type of travel and things that are going to be outside of your control, it's going to be hard to. So just play a regional schedule. Like hit up Virginia Tech, and that's just your division for this year. And see if they can get a South or one in the South going, maybe with like Florida State and Clemson and them and maybe some other teams. I don't know. So it's going to come really fast. And I hope by the time this comes out that not everything's canceled. Because at this point, it just feels like it's like bumming me out. Because everyone's opting out of playing. There were already players that were opting out. You have all this other stuff just going on outside of control. And, I mean, getting into, like, just sports being back, people don't care. Like, they waited too long. Like I said it earlier, I have on here, we'll skip the high school stuff for a second just to get to it. But Major League Baseball and the NBA, they came back. Their TV ratings are almost the exact same. Poor. People were talking all year how they had poor ratings, and we said earlier, like they should come back early from the coronavirus. It'd be the only show on television. But what did they do, Matt? They messed it up. They messed it up. So they're on a thing where they went ahead and waited and waited and waited, and now they're back down to what are the actual ratings? I sent them to you so that we're ready for this. The NBA right now, they're averaging 2.4 million viewers. Before the coronavirus, it was 2.3. This is supposed to be the season that is hyping you up for the playoffs. But nobody cares. Nobody wanted to see these games. They should have went right into the playoffs because now people tuned in. I think they said the first game had the highest rating. It was like 3.3 million viewers. It's been declining ever since. So like the first couple games boosted that average on television up so high. The funny thing is, like even their highest rated game, Matt, they lost to America's Funniest Videos that night that had a 3.7. So people waited till after the basketball game was over to turn on ABC and watch America's Funniest Videos. A rerun. Probably from 20 years ago. I mean, do they still make that show? So people, they were actively not watching it. And you can say, well, people just aren't watching TV. It's the summer. 60 Minutes, I think it was the same night or similar. It was on the same weekend report. They drew 7 million people. Double what the NBA had on their welcome back. And that was the Clippers-Lakers. They had LeBron that night, Matt. They can't even break 5 million. A Northwestern random football game gets 5 million people watching it. And that's why I think the Big Ten, they postponed it. They're looking to try to play. I think they have to be hedging their bets to try to get a vaccine so that they can get the full experience. And I think the other conferences will kind of wait. But like I said, I don't think they really had to do that if you started later. But maybe they're waiting to see a spike. I don't know.
But
kids back on campus, I don't know.
But I'll throw another hypothetical at you. What about these universities that are shutting it down in an attempt to slow a potential unionization of the college football athlete? Do you think that they shut it down to try to prevent players from trying to get with a union and trying to figure out a way that they could still maintain their amateur status while in college while receiving some form of union benefit?
See, I don't know how they're going to be able to put that together so fast. They had the chance whenever NCAA football came out. And I think what ended up happening, a lot of those players just signed. And they said, oh, we'll just take our check. And then when they got the check, it was like a joke. Like some guys were getting $3 because they were like, oh, yeah, you were in the game, but you barely played, or whatever EA Sports like decided. They were sending checks out. Some people got a couple $100. Others didn't get like anything at all. And so I think that's where the same thing happens here. You say like, okay, yeah, we want to play. We're going to come together and get all this stuff. Here's our list of stuff. At that point, they're already worried about players just getting sick. And like you said earlier in the show, the lawsuits. So why would you risk it bringing them back if they're just going to complain, or like worse, like what if they striked? Like they said, they put all this stuff into and all this money into just setting it up. And then the player just walked out. Like, that's where, if they really wanted to push it, just open it up for walk-ons. Like, they could just say, like, yeah, we don't, if you guys can keep opting out, we don't care. We can add as many walk-ons as we want. I mean, I guarantee they would have enough to fill a team. Is it going to be good football? Probably not. But, I don't know. Because I want to see more about who's behind this. Like, is it just Trevor Lawrence and like a group of other guys across different states? Because that's where you're already getting into, are you fighting the NCAA? Who are you fighting here? You fighting your school? I don't understand it.
That's kind of where I'm coming at with it, because I'm thinking a lot of these hashtag movements with the let them play and different stuff, it's come out super fast. And to have it on a national level where you have a lot of these more prominent college players talking about it makes me think that maybe there's something a little bit more to it, where they're getting this off the ground and trying to advocate, more for this. And the university's reaction to it is, all right, well, if you're worried about your playing conditions and you're worrying about different things within that, then we'll just shut it down. And then now we're keeping you safe because you don't have to practice, you don't have to play, and you don't have to worry about it.
And the big thing with that, when they do shut it down, does that mean that they get cut off from like the on-campus medical stuff too? Because if they truly shut it down and you're not doing any workouts or anything, like what if a player does get sick then? It's like a catch-22 for them. That's where, I mean, I would love to see them come together and have a voice, but at that point, you're going to have so many hands in that pot, it's not going to matter. Like, they're not going to get the money. If they want to get paid, they're not going to get it. Are they going to have other sports get into it? Like, who's going to be into this union? Is it just going to be football players? Because that's where I think you can draw the line and say, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. We need to stay healthy for, like, the NFL. If you push it to spring football, like the Big Ten, does Justin Fields play? Like, why would he play if he's going to be in the NFL draft? Because that's going to be right into that timeline. Unless, like I said, the vaccine's out in like early November and they give it and they feel safe about it that they can start playing in December, January, February with a championship in March. Like, and you just do an abbreviated schedule like you were going to do, conference only. Like, that's the only way that it would make sense where you can play and then you go right from playing to whatever the NFL does for a combine, and then they still have the draft in April. Like, you're running up against it. If you wait, like the Pac-12 kind of announced, and you start in January with practices, that means you can't play games until, the end of January? So you're going February, March, April with your championships in May? Too late. Then you're going to come right from that into the NFL for training camp or whatever? It's going to be a mess.
Well, the crazy thing with that then is you finish the season at that point, and then how fast are you then turning back around and trying to swing another fall camp out of it? So that turnaround is going to be insane.
Well, that's what hurt the NBA, and that's why I brought up the ratings for them. And same with the NHL. You put all this money into playing these regular season games because you couldn't get your owners together to say, look, your team had a losing record. You're out of the playoffs this year. We just need to play our games so we can get back to our business. Instead, they messed around. They went back and forth on it. They took forever. Then they had all these practice games for zero reason. Just make your regular season games the practice games. And now you're going to be pushing back your season next year. Your TV ratings are already down. What if the NFL does play? Who's going to watch the NBA Finals? Because the NFL's already came out and said if the college football is canceled across the board, they're open to playing Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays. Like, they're open to play every day. Because they can be more flexible with the schedule. And that's where I wonder if, like, let's say everything else is canceled, the NFL could work it around to give teams, like, a week off. And I think I talked about this last week too, Matt. My speculation for the NFL is just do an abbreviated schedule where you play your division teams and one other division this year. Because I want to see them play. So, like, you have the AFC North, you would play each team twice. Because the Steelers, like, you're not traveling very far to Cleveland, to Cincinnati, and to Baltimore. You can play them twice, keep your team relatively safe, limit the spread, whatever. That's 6 games right there. And then you play one other division, someone close to you in the AFC. Let's say, like the AFC, what is it? They're the North, so it'd be the East. And you play one game against them. And then it's a 10-game schedule. And then I think I pitched to make up for it, you just expand the playoffs. You get 2 teams, the top 2 teams from each division then. So, like, the AFC North, you'd get 2 teams, top 2 teams. The AFC East, you get top 2 teams. And then they would play against the winners from the other AFC side. So, like, number 2 would play number 1 in the West. And then number 1 would play number 2 in the West, or whatever. You could even cross it up. And then that's your playoffs. You just expand it for the year. Then you say, look, we just need these in. We're only playing 10 games so that we can space it out. And if we need to push stuff back or whatever, we can push it back. You might play a Thursday, have a week and a half off, play again like the following Sunday. And just space it out.
But I don't know that the Players Association would agree to some of that, or the owners wouldn't, because if you have contracts that are being linked to play incentives and you're only playing half of your games, then you're not even going to be close to making. I mean, I know you're going to argue, well, if you don't play at all, you're not going to hit them either, but I feel like with the partial games, that's going to hurt.
Matt, it's very basic math. They can just times it by whatever. Like, if your contract says 2,000 yards or whatever, and you're only playing 10 games, you just times it by whatever that fraction is, and then that's your new goal. I mean, if the owners really wanted to get it done, they could get it done, because the way I'm saying, you have college football, in my scenario, they're not playing college football. Major League Baseball, they're going to mess up their playoffs into a bubble. The NBA ratings are already down. You have a unique opportunity to own television for the entire week. Monday, Thursday game. 3 games on Saturday they're talking about, followed by 3 primetime games on Sunday. You're going to make up in television because people aren't watching television. The ratings are still down like 19-20%. You're starting to get, like, the bad weather. It will start to come. In the NFL, they could just say, like, hey, if you're a major network and you want to pitch us, this is our number, because we have to make up for fans not being in the stands. The networks, they already have that money because they were paying each college football conference a certain amount. And if they don't play, they're probably not going to pay them. I mean, I don't know how the contract's written. Maybe that's a guaranteed, which might throw a wrench into my plan for the NFL. But I honestly think that if they wanted to get it done, they could pitch this season. And because you're playing a divisional schedule, how many of those games are big marquee matchups? Because that's just the old rivalries. In the NFC, you're going to have all your rivalries. You're going to have Bears-Packers. You're going to have Ravens-Steelers. You're going to have Broncos Chiefs. Like, whatever the big rivalries are, Raiders Chiefs. Like, I don't even care which ones you're thinking of. Seahawks Niners. You're still going to get those games twice. And so you're the NFL. You're going to say, like, hey, yeah, you're going to get a big regional type matchup. And then just keep the regional the same. Because if there's not going to be fans there, because not all states are going to allow fans, you're going to make up the money in the TV contract. Because if the NFL, like, let's say they put it on and they averaged, 10 to 15 million viewers last year, what if the first game or the first 2 weeks they're getting 20 to 25 million? They're just going to be able to ask for more money. Or they're just going to get it from the commercial cut, whatever they get from the commercials. Like the advertisers, they're hungry. Advertisers aren't spending money right now because people aren't watching TV. And that's where you're getting the roll down effect that's hurting these other leagues. So if they don't get it done, the XFL, The Rock bought it, they're talking about doing a bubble right now. So if the NFL gets canceled and The Rock puts together an XFL bubble with his wife or ex-wife, I'm not sure how that partnership works, in November or even better, December, and they replace college football with just XFL games, I would have to guarantee that that's going to be successful. The XFL was already getting 1 million to 3 million people watching their games. If they're the only game in town, look out. So, I mean, that's my big points from last week that I think, I still think as I'm looking at them, the numbers, I think it could be worked out if they really wanted to. But it just comes down to if they want to or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know. And I mean, if the NFL is even more worried about travel, you could just even have the other 4 games just be your opposite division in the NFC. So the Steelers would play, the AFC North would play, the NFC North, even though I feel like that travel might be a little bit more. I mean, they can sit down and look at the schedule. Just see what's going to cut out travel. Don't do what Major League Baseball did and say, look, it's close to our normal schedule. No one cares about your normal schedule. I would like to see a number of people that actually sit down and would watch or at least follow all 162 games. Probably 0% of the people, unless you're the owner or a player or a player's wife, I guess. I don't know. Those are my big riffs on this. Their ratings are dropping. The Penguins got eliminated from the NHL playoffs. I said right after the show last week, they blew a 3-1 lead, and I said they're done. And a friend of mine laughed and said, you're thinking of the Pirates. I'm like, maybe the Pirates made me this negative, but once a team blows a lead like that, they're done. And they were eliminated the next game. So I guess I'll be watching the Hurricanes if they're playing. They looked pretty good. I saw ESPN had a hit piece on them saying that, can a team win the Stanley Cup if they don't have a consistent goalie? Penguins didn't have one. Everyone liked them. I mean, at this point, you just got to cut. You cut Murray, right? Everyone's going after Jack Johnson. I don't know. I feel like his confidence has to be shaken. You can't be benching him. Just cut him. Go for a young guy, someone that doesn't have the issues, the injury stuff. I mean, that's all my hockey stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're trying to cling to the fact that the Penguins were built during those cup run years off of speed and offense, and there was neither speed nor offense. So if you're going to follow that philosophy, then you got to get younger and you got to be willing to move some of the heavier pieces on the roster. And I know Chris Letang's usually a guy that everyone quickly points to and says, he's one that can go, but I think he does so much that I don't know that helps you. I think you got to start realistically looking at how many more years do you hang on to Malkin and Sid, and it may sound blasphemous to put those names out there, but do you let them linger as an average team for how many more years, and then you're at a point where you're you're going back to the early 2000s before Crosby came back, where Penguins were looking at possibly folding as a franchise because they were losing.
And that's where, I hate to single out goalies too, because the power play was atrocious. Like you said, if you're going to be quick and focused on the offense, you can't go what were they? 1 for 10 or something? I forget what the actual number was, but it's bad. I tried to block it out already. But you're not being aggressive. You just sit there, keep the puck in the zone, not doing anything. It's frustrating to watch. But like you said, what do you do? Where do you go from here? I think Malkin, if I was the owner, I'd look to move him. Think of how Yager, you're going to have to split the team up if you're going to try to keep one person around for their end of their career. I think you make Crosby your Chipper Jones and you tell everyone else goodbye. That's if I was doing it, because in the long term, you have Lemieux, Crosby. You don't get rid of him. You don't want him on another team. That'd be like the Celtics just getting rid of Larry Bird, being like, "Hey, Larry, you got a couple rings, but you're not doing it anymore. We're gonna move you and try to bring in some young guys." Larry's like, "I'm the face of the franchise. What are you doing?" And so maybe that would even bring a spark into it. I don't know.
But the only reason I would even say Crosby to move is because can he stay healthy? He hasn't proved that he can stay consistently healthy over the course of a season. So maybe he becomes expendable because you can sell the name and get more picks and players for him and actually be able to build back around it. You have to look long-term versus short-term payoff. If you have between, and I don't think that it's a exclusively only Sid or only Malkin, but Gino's been showing that he can be healthier than Crosby, but they both have their issues.
But I'm looking at it from a franchise perspective, because you brought up how they were struggling and almost moved or folded, whatever they were going to do, because last in attendance and a lot of things Pittsburgh people block out. They're like, it's a great sports town. It's you almost lost your hockey team, and the Pirates are god awful. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, Crosby is the legendary guy. Look at what Atlanta did with Chipper Jones. You have him, let him retire, almost like a Derek Jeter. You don't want to get into a situation where he becomes like Tom Brady, where he's just out and about, and younger people just forget that he even played with the Penguins.
Yeah.
Because if Tom Brady wins a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay or 2, then it's not about him being with the Patriots anymore. It's just Tom Brady's awesome. And I would hate for Crosby to be that type. I think the Penguins need him more than they'd Malkin. That's just my take on it. I know you're looking in the short term, but I'm looking from a franchise perspective. I think it's very tough to win the cup. So you might not have a good of chance keeping Crosby, but I think for the franchise, it would just be better. And if you can keep both, great. I'm not saying that. Maybe they'll both take cuts. I don't know if they have, because the NFL has the issue where when you get past a certain amount of years, you have to have a certain salary, you're locked in, the Cam Newton fiasco. So then that gives you a limited amount of suitors. But how some of the superstars hung around for a long time in the NHL, maybe they don't have that problem. So maybe you can keep both. And maybe that would be the ideal, because then you can go back to the Yager deal and think remember that split, how messy that was, and then you don't want a repeat of that. So I don't know. Last thing, circling back around, high school football, Pennsylvania, everything, and that's what soured me on Pitt and Penn State, is whenever you're in the middle of workouts and practicing, everything's going well, and yet you're not getting, and that's why, I said, I hate to be political about it, but when you're talking about in the grand scheme of things, You're trying to make colleges work by having all these state rules come in and out and trying to get exemptions for travel and like the quarantine stuff. Like, how can we get around that and be safe and hopefully not get any lawsuits coming our way? And then you have high school football that looked like it was going to be good to go. There's already, my beef was, and I talked about it last week, and I know you weren't on, you have youth sports playing. Like Little League and what is it, like Triple ABA? Like, they've been playing no problems. And people keep telling me just randomly, like, oh yeah, you're waiting for football to come. There's too much contact. Like, in basketball, because I know they've been playing summer, like, travel basketball and stuff, you're literally touching another man and, like, sweating on each other. With football, at least you have padding. And if you gave them a visor, there's even less chance of, like, transmission or whatever. I know it's still better than, like, what you'd get wearing a mask at the store or whatever, but still, like, basketball, you're so close quarters. If anyone's sick, you're all getting it. Like, you're all getting it in basketball. So, like, baseball, even, they had problem with spread. You don't even touch each other in baseball. So, like, you're going to be coming in contact too, because if one person gets the catcher sick, everybody stands by the catcher. Everybody touches the same ball. Same with football. Like, I don't see how football has more of a chance just because they hit each other and tackle each other. Like, do you think they just, I mean, maybe you watch too many NBA games. They just stand around on defense. You have one guy playing defense, whoever has the ball, everyone else just kind of hangs out. I don't know. But,
well, and the funny thing is that with the basketball comparison is that basketball is an indoor sport. So when you're looking at some of that, like, football's played outside. So you have an open air environment where supposedly it's supposed to be a more difficult environment to spread the virus as opposed to playing inside, and there's not an issue.
Well, I was talking to someone, they thought that the 76ers were playing in Pennsylvania. And they're like, oh, they're playing. That's not a big deal. I'm like, they're playing in Orlando. What are you talking about? Like, they're not following the indoor guidelines. Like, yeah, they probably wouldn't be playing in Pennsylvania. Like, if they're not letting the Blue Jays play there in an open thing where they already have so many other athletes playing there, it's because they don't want extra people in the same stadium having to clean things twice or whatever the regulations are. But for high school, if you're giving players the chance to do it virtually, and I know the lawsuits is a big thing and it varies by state, and I haven't lived in Pennsylvania for a while, so I'm not up to date on my liability type stuff. But that was the big thing that a lot of people were saying about, like, the colleges, because a couple colleges, they invited players back and they, like, kind of forced them into signing waivers. That stuff doesn't really hold up. But, I mean, you're going to get into just a situation where you're just watching yourself and then it's not good for the kids. It's just not, like, there's no outlet for them. And like I said, you're putting them out there, and it's not just the football thing, because it's not just one sport that's getting canceled. They're blocking, like, all fall sports. And the funny thing was, I saw someone specifically call out cross country. And I thought, cross country, that's probably one of the safest sports you can play. You can run anywhere. You can have them run the trail at different times. It's outdoors.
But
like,
when
the
they
sun
start,
kills
when they
it.
start, they all start muddled together.
Yeah, but Matt, who's saying you have to run the races the same? That's what everyone has, like, this old mindset where it's like, can't change the schedule. What? The NFL has to play. What? You have to keep playing weird, like, ways that you have to do. You have to play the champion if you're a division winner. Like, you have to do this. I was like, no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. You literally make up their own rules. Like, you could sit down and say, hey, cross country, like, you're going to run at different times. Like, each person goes, like, different times. You can make them run single. Like, if you really wanted them to do it, you could do whatever you wanted to do. Because it's a timed sport. You have a time. That's your time. It'd be like if they're running 100-meter dashes and they're like, we have to have 6 guys. There's 6 lanes here, Matt. Like, that's what people are telling me. They're like, you can't. There's no other way around it. They already put 6 numbers on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to fill them up. We can't just have guys run 1, 3, and 6 or whatever, like 1, 3, 5, like you're splitting them up. Like, nope. It's not how the lines were painted. We can't run that race. So, I mean, that's my last beef. It's almost like people are set and they're thinking, instead of getting creative and saying like, hey, let's do something so the kids, can get out of their house. Like, we want them to go to school, but you can't run cross country. No way. That's dangerous. Because like you said, they're huddled for like what? A couple minutes? Not even. Like a couple seconds at the beginning usually. So, I don't know.
The big issue that I have is all of this stuff recently has made me wonder how many of these legislators and politicians and different people, how many people have been bullied that they feel like they have to go after football in particular. You know, we've gone several shows into the concussion issue and how when you're looking at other sports, how there are a high level of concussions and other things. Like, the only sport that anyone ever cares about is football, and it's targeted so much more for a lot of this stuff. And I, to kind of go back off of what you were saying, I look at, there's Little League, there's AAU basketball, there's travel softball and baseball that's going on. There's fans there. And the initial issue that was being presented in Pennsylvania was that when school starts, the parents weren't going to be allowed in the stadium. There were no fans in the stadium. And immediately in talking with my wife, she said, well, what happens if a player were to get injured? You know, are their parents going to have to like make sure that they have their phone with them so that you can call them, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be making the medical judgments on what they want to do with their child. So now, you know, if you're saying no fans in the stands, there were those issues, and there were actually some petitions going around to try to have the governor allow fans in the stands. And what ended up happening was we had our media day that I was really excited to be able to talk about on here tonight, and it was a great event. We had 4 of our seniors represented, and we were able to kind of talk with the different media outlets, and everyone was social distanced from the conference, and it was a really well structured event. But it was like all that positive vibes and like that feeling like this could actually happen went away like within 24 hours. Because they said, oh, yeah, tomorrow Governor Wolf's going to give his recommendations. And when they questioned him about fans in the stands, it was the last question of his press conference. And he said, actually, my recommendation is no sports until January 1st, 2021, and walked off like mic drop. And I thought that is so insane that there was no time for any questions. It was just out of nowhere. Like, almost like saying isn't real, bye. And just, that's it. And it was frustrating because we've spent all summer and we've been conditioning and doing team workouts. And I mean, even having some 7-on-7s with 4 other schools. And like we talked earlier, there were no issues. We had no problems. Everything was well coordinated. Even with hosting 5 teams in one space, everyone spread out. Everyone was in their own section. So like even like once the games were like that, your game was done, then you just moved off, and there was no intermingling between the players. It was like we stayed within pretty much our own team, and I felt like it was safe. It was safe enough that I felt comfortable going. The parents of my players felt comfortable sending them because they signed waivers at the beginning of the season to be able to participate. And I thought, if we're all willing to do it, why stand in our way? And I guess that was the thing that really stung the most. And so I was proud of our athletic association that instead of just following the mandate and just saying, well, we're advising to shut it down as well, that they decided, they ruled that there was going to be a 2-week delay. And I think that kind of helps us out because that gets us closer to school starting. And I don't understand the difference between saying students can go face-to-face in the building And I know that the assumption is, well, you're going to be at your desk, and then you're going to be 6 feet apart, transitioning from class to class, and like you can say that, and that's great intentions, but realistically, how many schools with a full school capacity are going to be able to provide that kind of spacing for the students and keeping students away from each other? Because they've been spending, for the better part of the quarantine, they're hanging out with their friends, they're doing stuff together, that they're not going to keep all that distance away. It's going to be really tough to transition back into that they can do that all day in school, but then we can't go outside and have a practice. I mean, unless the perception from these guys is that we go to football practice and everyone just lays on top of each other like the entire time. Like, I don't understand where that logic comes from.
That's why I was confused the first time, because, I've been in isolation for a long time, probably going crazy myself. But I had to leave the house to get my oil change in my car, and I'm driving, and I see all these sports being played, and I thought, the way the media talks, like, no one's even out of their house. And then it's like, why are they playing these sports and no one's ever talking about them? Like, you're playing, like, your softballs, your, like, Little League. There's, like, 12 games going on. Full crowd. Like, I didn't even look for masks. I just saw, like, holy cow, this parking lot is completely packed. So then you're like, oh, they're playing that here. And then I get up to Pennsylvania, same thing. And then I'm, like, down in Virginia, same thing. So it's like, there are sports being played. Oh, okay. But you're just singling out certain ones. Like, you're telling me football can't be played. And that's what I'm saying, like singling out cross-country. I forget even what state did that, if that was Pennsylvania as part of their PIAA thing, or if I saw that somewhere else.
Yeah, it was them, because there was golf as well. Golf's another one that shut down golf, but you can golf by yourself. If you're golfing with someone, like, you can be away. Like, you're not, no one's trying to tackle you while you're golfing unless you're golfing with a bunch of idiots.
And Matt, they even had golf courses, like down here, my golf course. They have rules like they don't even have flags out. Like, you're not supposed to do the stuff. They have, like, the spray to, like, spray the hole whenever you're done. So, like, they have everything in place that's been working for months now. Tom Brady played in a golf tournament in May. The only reason I know that is because someone was saying that, oh, people aren't just watching sports. That was like the NBA rebuttal. And then someone else on Twitter posted, 5 million people watched Tom Brady hit a couple golf balls into the trees. Because in May, like, when it was awful. Like, you can't tell me, oh, yeah, the NBA ratings are down because people don't want to watch sports. They want to watch sports. They just don't want to watch the Pelicans play some other team for zero reason. The NBA had a chance to just go into a full-on tournament, same with the NHL and Major League Baseball, but because their owners are so, like, stuck in the past, they can't get past it. Same with, like, high schools, and I know, like you're saying, you get the kids on campus, but then you're going to tell them, no, don't play sports. Because to be honest, like, I don't even know. You get them together, they're already there. What's the difference? You keep them a few extra hours. I know that the inter-school travel is pretty much the same argument I'm saying why college football is most likely going to cancel. Because you can't say, oh, yeah, you're going to travel across state and we're going to do all this testing and stuff. Because some schools just, frankly, they can't afford it. Like, there are so many colleges in the black that are in the red, whatever they call it, like in the negative, that you're not going to be able to pay for that anyway. And then you're going to add all these extra expenses and only play 12 games, like, or 10 games, whatever it is. You're cutting a couple games out with no fans. It's just, that's why I think it's just depressing. We're on the decline now where everything's getting canceled. Because, like, if pro sports that are playing get canceled, then it's just going to be like a regional thing. And I think different regions are going to be shut down. Some will have high school sports if they have very low virus counts. But, like, some of the bigger cities, like in California, that have, like, the high numbers, they're not going to have anything. And that's why I look at, like, the Pac-12, like, they're shutting everything down. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want my kid to travel there to play a game. Like, that would be nuts. But you can't tell me, like, okay, it's relatively safe wherever you live, like in the middle of nowhere. You can't play a neighboring town where there's almost zero cases. Like, no, you probably could.
Well, that's always been one of the biggest complaints that I've had is that even when you look at the reopening of the counties in Pennsylvania, our area is always lumped in with the Pittsburgh side, even though we're more centrally located. If Pittsburgh and Philly have issues, the rest of the state just gets lumped into that mix. And I feel like within my conference, even to take the state playoffs out, just providing the senior kids an opportunity to play, even if we played within our conference, and maybe even, to say a step further, the districts, because of the schools are all going to be close within the district, that would be great for our area. And that would be a great way for at least the seniors to get some opportunities to play. And I know that there was some speculation in terms of could they pull off a spring like sports and give each group like 2 months and do like January and February for winter sports, March and April for football, and May and June for your spring sports. But I feel like that's almost, if you're moving it to spring, it hurts everyone. And why not allow, I guess my own personal view of all this is let's give it a chance. They put out these best practices and they had 6 months to figure it out. And if the best they're saying is if you're at practice and you're wearing your mask and you're maintaining social distance as best as you can and you're limiting contact player to player, let me see how it works within my own team, because so far this summer it's been no factor. We've been able to not have any issues with it. Now, maybe things change if we get into the school year and then somebody tests positive and our school goes under the quarantine protocols and we're done for 2 weeks. If that were the case and then we come back and somebody else tests positive and you're out another 2 weeks, like, I can totally understand. You have data and you have reason to shut it down. But, August 10th, why do you have to be in a rush? Or August 11th, why do you have to be in a rush to shut it down? I think there's, especially given that specifically to Pennsylvania, that there's been no deaths, 0 to 20. The kids that are going to be participating have not passed away from coronavirus in Pennsylvania. Let them play. Give them a chance to play if they want to play. And for the kids that have sicknesses and have pre-existing conditions, nobody's forcing them to play. They can voluntarily choose to not participate, knowing that they could potentially be at risk. I think they need to allow it to be an individual basis, and then I'll take it a step further and say families need to be smart with it too. That if you're choosing to be in that environment, then you should not be trying to sue everyone in the world.
Well, I think that was part of some of the legislation, and I know too political already, but I think that they were talking about trying to put language in some of the relief packages where, like, hey, if we're going to give money to schools and you send your kid voluntarily, then you're not allowed to do any lawsuits. And I think if that goes through, that might save some of this stuff. But I haven't heard anything on that. Maybe it did go through and I just don't know. Because it was similar to, like, okay, we're going to give the hospitals this aid, but it's also going to protect them. So I don't know if that stuff actually passed, but it's very similar to, like, the schools. And I think the sticking point was some of them wanted it to be in-person only. Like, you only got the aid if your school was open for in-person. But some of them are hybrid, and it's tough. And, like, for that same reason, I think if you put those protections in because it is a pandemic, and then, like you said, you don't have to go. Same with, like, people keep saying, like, oh, you can't have pro sports. Like, what if a fan goes and gets sick? It's like, you don't have to be there. Like, it's supposed to be a free country. If people want to go, let them go. But if they get sick there, guess what? It's on them. Plus, you don't even know if that's where they got sick. I mean, yeah, they might be spreading it to other people, but then, again, you paid money to go there. It's not like it's a free park. It's like you're going to a state park and they're just having a Steelers game there. Like, you're like, what? No one told me. I mean, it's very clear. Like, you know what you're getting yourself into. And that's why, like, whenever they started to put all these limits on tailgating and things like that, it was almost like, come on. Do you want people to have fun? They're paying to be there. Let them do whatever they want to do. And if they have a ride, like, let them Uber. I mean, Uber was a big save for that. And they never lifted those restrictions when Uber came onto the scene. Because they're still stuck in the old way. Like, oh, people might be drunk driving or whatever. So, I mean, that's off on a different tangent. But same type of thing. If you're there, you don't have to be there. Like, they're already letting college athletes opt out. They're letting NFL players opt out and still get their year of pension or whatever. Just don't play if you're worried about it. But, like, Deion Sanders came out, and this is going to be my last thing. Deion Sanders came out and told people, look, you usually don't stay in the league that long. So if you opt out, your job might not be there when you come back. Like, what if a rookie comes in and just blows up? Because it happens. Like, you might be gone. So, if you want to opt out, that's great. But it's just like anyone else. Normal people, they can't just opt out of their job. It's not like I can go and say, you know what? I'm just not going to go into work right now because I could get sick. And then they're like, well, we're just going to add a year onto your pension. And it's like, oh, nice. Nice.
Well, I look at it the other way. If Joe Burrow sat out last season, if the pandemic had happened during last season, is he the number one pick to the Bengals?
Is he even drafted?
That's $1 million question. And I mean,
that's the better question, Matt, because it's not, is he going to the Bengals? He's not even drafted probably. Does he even have any games started? I mean, he couldn't even win the job at Ohio State.
So, I mean, he was the one that he put it out that was like, we have players should be allowed to play if they choose to in college, because this is their audition for the NFL. And had he have not had that opportunity, he'd be looking for work somewhere else right now. So I mean, to that end, that was a point that I thought allow a lot of these players to give them the opportunity. They're looking at trying to make the jump to a professional sport. If they don't have the film, if they don't have the opportunity to showcase what they have, then that really puts them at a major disadvantage.
Well, that's where I'm really hoping that, like, Nebraska does end up playing, because I think that could kill the conference affiliations, because there's really zero reasons for it. And I'm not saying that I want the NCAA to get more power, because I pretty much want them dead too. Like, I think you could get a couple of the bigger schools to just say, you know what, like, this ain't it. Like, this is going to be the year. Like, if Nebraska plays and, like, they're having fun, like, do you really think Ohio State's going to sit by and let them play? Like, no, that's not it. And then do you think if Ohio State comes back, Michigan's going to sit there and they're going to be like, we're paying our coach millions of dollars while everyone else is out there playing? I think what you're going to see is maybe like a real, I don't want to say like a minor league, but I think that's where you get into like some of the union stuff. Maybe, just maybe, football will start to separate and the NCAA can kind of take over and kind of help out for the other sports. Because they're already losing a bunch of money anyway besides basketball. And the NBA or the NCAA already has their hand in that pot. Maybe all the other sports then just become like a regional thing, because let's be honest, college conferences are only set up for football. I mean, you can look at the Big East. How many times is the Big East going to fail because they try to focus on basketball? I mean, realistically, they have a conference. Then it's like football schools. Then they're dying. Then they're kicking off. Then they become whatever conference they became. Then the Big East is back. Like, that's what happens when you're a basketball conference. When you build your conference around football, then you're a big dog. Like, that's basically the truth. Like, Big Ten isn't just poaching members from other conferences because they're strong in basketball. They don't even care about that. Besides Michigan State, maybe. It's like the second sport. You're like, I'm pretty good at basketball. So, I don't know. Maybe that will happen, and then we'll start to see more of like a uniform rule set across, at least from scheduling. I think that's one of the big things that the NCAA could really, or college football could really help with, is if they had uniform schedules. And maybe like you just have a second tier of football that kind of just goes back to the old bowl systems. Or maybe they just have a bigger playoff of like teams like ECU and App State and give them a chance for a championship.
Well, I figured it makes perfect sense for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten to move their games to the spring, because it'll just be like a regular playoff year where the SEC and the ACC play for the national championship, and then they can just kind of do their own little like sub games and play their Rose Bowl game in the spring. It'll be just like a regular season.
You're going to trigger Ohio State people. That's what I'm saying. If Nebraska plays, Ohio State isn't going to sit by. I've already seen the letters of fans sending in saying that they're not donating to the school anymore because they're not playing. So it's only a matter of time before, because like you can't make the announcement super early to shut down with no data like that really shows it. I mean, they said there's a couple heart issues or whatever. But do you think if they would have got sick at Food Lion, which I don't know, that's a Southern thing, but like if they get sick at Food Lion, they're not going to know they had a heart issue, Matt. They only know that because they're playing college football. That's my last thing. So, anything else?
Yeah. Want to send some love to Coach Hamilton. Has the #1 recruiting class for 2021. Landed another 5-star and didn't need to get a recruiting bump because we already had the #1 recruiting class. So, onward and upward for the Noles in basketball.
Oh, you're talking about Seminoles. I thought you meant Pep Hamilton. That's the only Coach Hamilton I know. XFL, baby. Bring him back.
But
I think he landed somewhere else, though. Hey, Deion Sanders said he wants to coach in 2021.
Hit me up. We got an opening.
Oh, I figured he'd bring the swag back to Florida State, just like Miami when they brought their swag back.
Nah. No, I don't think. I think we're good.
All right, well, that's it. Like, hopefully football keeps going. Because if football completely gets canceled, I don't know how we're going to do the podcast. But for right now, we're still going. Hopefully news doesn't get worse. Maybe things will start to turn around. But thanks for listening. Go to Southbound Sports. You can see all our old episodes. Probably going to be doing something with that in the next coming weeks. So check that out, and we will see you next week. Thanks.